So according to my clock, we've hit 4 o'clock and we'll get started. So welcome. I am really excited to welcome you to our webinar today, How to Throw Away Bad Work Habits for Good. Now, I'm really excited because we have got work habits, all of us have got work habits that slow down our progress. And what I love about this as a topic area is that how we communicate with ourselves is really at the heart of this matter. So we're going to get into all of that today. For those of you who I've not had the pleasure of meeting before or working with, I'm Kim Van Niekerk. I'm an educator and coach in creating communication and fundraising mindsets. And I'm going to be your host for today's webinar, thanks to the EIB Institute and the social program that runs these sessions. In fact, this webinar is part of a series of webinars that the EIB Institute is running through their social program, and they're organized principally for the alumni of its social innovation tournament, but also for any other change makers or people who are out there looking for inspiration. I know we've got a number of alumni joining us today, so it was wonderful for my inbox to be sort of flooding in with details of all these alumni that I've had the pleasure of working with. So it's great to have you guys, and it's wonderful to have so many people who are spread across Europe who found out about the webinar, who are just curious to find out more about these ideas of bad work habits and how we can throw them away. If you aren't familiar with the EIB Institute's Social Innovation Tournament, then please check out the EIB Institute website and you can find out loads more through their social media. If you scroll back to the top of the webinar chat that we've got started, you'll notice that actually at the very top we've also put a link through to details where you can find out lots more. And it's also a really good opportunity for me to share with you that we have the Social Innovation Tournament, its 9th version, launching or finalizing its applications really soon. So you have a few days left up until the 4th of March to apply to win €50,000 to take your high impact venture even further or get your world-changing idea on track. So applications are open now. If you are a social entrepreneur or you know someone who is, get them to check it out. It's a fabulous program to be a part of. Just ask any of the people who are here on the alumni and they'll let you know. I'm seeing that Felix has said that you can't seem to scroll up on the webinar chat. So I'm going to ask my colleague Katie, who's on the call with us, if she will just repost that link for you so you can make sure. There you go. Brilliant. Thank you so much. So let's have a little dive into now looking at what's going on throughout the rest of this webinar. So let me share with you what we're going to be up to. So as you can see from my slide here, we are going to take a bit of time to look at, well, what are bad work habits? How do these habits develop, and what are your bad work habits specifically that we can start really looking at, and what should you be doing with them? We're going to start a lovely process in that space of really taking you through a methodology of really staring hard at these habits and addressing them. But then once we've got to a point of where we're feeling really uncomfortable with these bad habits, we want to start looking at how do we replace them with something that's really strong and really good. So we're going to look at how we kickstart those good habits. And then of course, we need to make sure that they stick. So we're going to cover a number of tips on how we can make sure that you keep up those lovely new habits. At the very end of this session, we're going to dive into some time to look at your questions. I've tried really hard to incorporate as many of the questions that I got through ahead of the webinar into the actual session itself. But if I miss any of them or you want to re-ask them, please use the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. And you can type in your questions at any time there. My colleague Katie is on hand to help me manage those questions. We are going to be wrapped up within the hour for this session, but I will do my best to get through as many as possible. So pop any questions you have in there and we'll manage them as we go. If, of course, I'm going too fast for any of my non-English speakers, or you would like me to clarify anything, please just pop a note into the chat box or through on the Q&A, and Katie will help me stay on top of that as well. And then what we'll be doing is wrapping up with the world's shortest ever poll. So please, please, please hang on to the very last minute to literally take 10 seconds out of your life. If it takes more than 10 seconds, then there's a problem. To just complete 2 super quick questions. That means we know whether we should be doing more of these webinars and whether we've done a good job with them. So that's the outline for our webinar time. Just to let you know, we are recording this webinar so that we can make sure it's available for you to review later. So don't worry if you don't manage to capture all of the details or take down all of the notes. There's a lot of prompts for you to reflect and think through this webinar about your habits. And what you might really want to do is really hit the pause button on the webinar replay. Take the time to really go through it in detail, rather than trying to keep up with everything I'm asking you to do in just an hour for today's session. So the recording will be there for you. And if you think the contents of this session would be helpful to anyone else in your network, then of course, please feel free to share it with them afterwards and get them to sign up to notifications for any of the future sessions that we're going to run. So shall we dive in? Okay, let's start looking at this first bit of like, what are bad work habits? Well, I think it was the lovely Eliza who said as she signed up for the webinar, the topic of bad work habits is so wide. And as she signed up and said this, I couldn't agree more. Your early questions covered points as broad as, how can we get a better work-life balance? Because there's a habit, there's a bit of an issue around that. How can we make sure that when we're not getting much sleep, that isn't affecting our motivation to work? And how do we keep up our motivation to work? How do we stop saying yes to new tasks? How do we address some of the concerns we've got around, do we focus on accuracy or do we focus on speed in our work? We had people saying things like, how do we stop getting caught up in loads of new plans and new ideas that keep coming, but you're getting, pushed and pulled around all these new ideas and you're not focused on what you want to be doing. People said, how do we stop worrying about opportunities that we don't have the time to deliver? How do we stop talking before thinking? So how do we make sure we're taking that moment just to think through before we're saying something? How do we stop worrying about what our colleagues think about us and our work? And I think I would add in that so many things that I constantly see coming up, both for myself and for people that I work with, is this question of, how do we stop procrastinating? How do we stop being late? How do we stop spending too much time on social media or Netflix when there's a really good series on? How do we manage to do to-do lists better? And how do we stop our deadlines from slipping? Well, the good news is if you are asking these questions, you are human and we are all facing them. But of course, we want to keep growing and improving. So this idea of a bad habit is the fact that we've got all these concerns and these issues and these things we want to be tackling, but a habit is really when it becomes a routine of behavior that's repeated regularly and tends to occur almost like subconsciously. So you begin to start functioning on autopilot and just doing it without even thinking about it. So you are saying yes to things without even realizing it. You're talking instead of thinking without even realizing it. And that's the stuff we want to be stopping and pausing, because otherwise these issues never really get addressed. We're never growing and changing. And if these are issues that are showing up consistently and they're unwanted, we can really label them as habits we want to move past. Now, for some of you, the issues that you sent through might not feel like they're regular problems popping up just yet. It might be that it's a one-off, or it's a couple of times it's happened and you don't feel like it's really habit yet. But actually, that's really great. It's great we're talking about it, because we want to make sure it doesn't become habit, that you're always worrying about that work-life balance, that you're always worrying about saying yes to new tasks. We want to get it now before it becomes cemented as a deep subconscious habit. So we're going to work through a number of techniques at whatever stage you're at, whether it's a full-blown habit that you need to break or it's something that's new that you're worrying about. We're going to have a look at particular techniques that can help you solve those challenges. And the thing we're going to really look at is how it's all rooted in communication with yourself. So let's go on and have a little look at, in terms of habits in particular, how are these habits formed and developed, and what does it look like? Well, as you can see on this slide, we've got 3 key areas. Now, we develop habits through regular repetition. So until something becomes automatic, a bit like crossing road or brushing your teeth or something you're really familiar with. Now, there are 3 main components of how a habit forms. So that starts with, as you can see in the orange box, a trigger. And that trigger causes the behavior. And then that behavior is rewarded at some point. So we're going to start by talking about this behavior in the middle, because that's probably the thing you're most likely to be noticing at the moment. Now, the behavior is likely to be the actual habit. So it's the habit of saying, I don't know what to do, the habit of getting up to go and do something else when you should be focusing on your emails, the habit of checking social media, the habit of saying yes to everything, the habit of worrying about missing opportunities, the habit of focusing on the depressing and hard things about your job. Whatever it might be, this is the behavior that we've got going on. It's a thing that we're consistently doing. And sometimes that behavior can be really linked to our survival instincts as human beings. You might have heard people talking about the fact that we've got this freeze, fight, or flight mechanism that kicks in when we're really worried about stuff or anxious. Well, you know, the freeze mechanism is really doing nothing about some of the things you've got to do. So you get into the habit of not addressing issues. The flight element is the habit of getting up and going and doing something else instead of the important things you should be doing. And sometimes you might even have the fight mechanism of blaming our environment, blaming a situation, blaming other people for the habit that's developed. And these become some of the series of things that we end up doing. We're going to get into lots of examples of this, so don't worry if this isn't feeling quite clear just yet. So that's the behavior. That's what we tend to do as our habit. Now, the trigger is the experience that we have that prompts that behavior. So your brain has learned over time that when you have certain experiences, that you should go on to make that behavior. You can spend some time really noticing what your triggers are for your behaviors. And in fact, that's the root of all the things we're going to talk about. You know, you can start looking at like, who's present in the room with me when I take on that behavior? Or what time of day is it? Or what's happening around me, or what's not happening around me? So, for example, I developed the behavior of going up in a very British way to go and make a cup of tea every time my inbox started filling up with lots and lots of emails. So the behavior was getting up to go and get a cup of tea, the flight mechanism, but the trigger was the inbox starting to fill up. Those were the things that were causing me to want to go and take on that behavior. Now, your triggers might be something completely different. They might be the fact that senior staff members or senior colleagues are around, and them being more senior to you is triggering you to behave in a particular way. You might find that you don't want to disappoint colleagues, and that's your trigger. It's not wanting to disappoint people. You might find that having too little time is what is your trigger. Having too few people to help you is your trigger. Your to-do list getting longer is your trigger. A particular colleague is your trigger. There'll be a multitude of different things, and we're going to explore them a bit further. But as you start to see the triggers, then become the thing that causes your behavior. So the triggers cause the behavior, but what continues the loop of making you consistently keep doing these unhelpful things and making them habits is the third box, the reward. And it's the reward we get from doing them. Now, sometimes it's hard to think, you're like, well, what's the reward I get from, doing these unhelpful bad habits? Because they're bad habits. But there is something that temporarily gives you a sense of respite. So for me, the getting up to make the cup of tea, there was a very temporary escape from looking at my inbox. And on really bad days, it was a hot chocolate, not a cup of tea. And that tasted really good. So I was getting all these feelings of like light relief and realizing, life isn't that bad. I've got a cup of hot chocolate in my hand. Now, for you, if it's checking social media, you get that little sense of light relief from being distracted. Or if you are even having a sense of, if things feel really bad, and my behavior is that I'm delaying things, or I'm leaving things to the last minute, or I'm not dealing with issues, the reward sometimes can be friends and family and colleagues saying, oh, it's really hard, I'm really sorry for you. And we get a bit of attention from people, and that becomes our reward. But whatever it is, these are the rewards for not dealing with our bad habits. But because they're there, they tend to stick, because our brain goes, for a moment, I felt safer, I felt happier. Now, these old habits are really hard to break away from, because the behavior patterns which we repeat become imprinted in our neural pathways. So it's a little bit like a river having a very strong course that it can flow down. And what we're asking it to do is to stop flowing down that very well-formed route, and instead start making a very different track and approach. But the good news is there's some really lovely techniques for shifting the course of this river, shifting the course of this habit, or stopping these issues from becoming habits in the first place. So let's take a closer look at what they are. So I'm introducing you in this slide to getting you to start really thinking about, what are your bad work habits? Because we want to get really clear. And then what should we do to start trying to tackle them? Now, the most important step is that you are exploring the question of, what is my bad habit? Or looking at what keeps coming up even though you don't want it to. So what is unwanted at work and yet keeps repeating, keeps coming up again and again and again? Now, the reason why it's so important that we start really staring at these issues of what our bad habits are is because there's a researcher called Wendy Wood who estimated back in 2002 that about 43% of our daily behaviors are habits. So that's nearly half of our work, half of our activity is being done on autopilot for almost half a day. Imagine. And if these behaviors aren't helpful, then we need to become conscious of them if we're going to change them. Now, as some of you who I'm more familiar with will know, that I use a lot of mindfulness work in my coaching. And one of the beautiful techniques and concepts from mindfulness is that we start to think about a circle with a line through the middle. And above the line are all the things that we're conscious of, all the things that we are very aware that we're doing, we're in the moment, we're conscious that we're doing it at that time. And below the line are all the things that we are unconscious of, all our habits, that being on autopilot, that 43% that Wendy Wood says we've got going on. So that's a huge amount. Now, what we want to do is start really shining a light on habits that are in that below the line space that are not helping us, so that we become conscious of them and hyper aware of them. And this is the process that stops the negative impact of them on us and on others. So you can start right now to start thinking about, what are some of your unwanted habits at work, and just start beginning to get clearer on what they are. What are the things that keep coming up that you really wish weren't coming up because it's really holding you back in your progress? Take a space to jot it down somewhere, start thinking about it. And importantly, we want to look at these unwanted habits and explore them really, really gentle, which is why I've written there, be gentle. Because this is another crucial step. If you make yourself wrong or bad or inadequate for having bad habits, you're effectively shaming yourself, and you cannot build good work habits on shame. So I want you to go into this with full compassion for the fact that we all have unconscious habits that are absolutely normal. And I want you to congratulate yourself for being on a webinar, wanting to look at them more closely, because that is a beautiful first step. So in this spirit of being very gentle with ourselves and not making ourselves wrong, we're going to use this acronym, which you can see I've got up here, called RAIN, R-A-I-N. We're going to cover the first two parts of that acronym now, and start exploring how we can use it. So this acronym is a technique developed by Tara Brach, who, again, I think I put the link in earlier into the chat, but if you can't see it, I'll ask Katie to relink it to her website so you can check her out further. She's a psychologist and a mindfulness coach, and developed this technique as a way of us really looking very, very closely at what our habits are and staring beneath this line of this circle. Why I love this is because some of the best researchers out there, in fact, the other link that Katie's just popped up for you there is Judson Brewer's website, and he is one of the biggest researchers as a psychologist into habits and how we break bad habits and replace them with new ones. Is that he's a massive advocate of mindfulness. So the combination of using Tara's work here feels really great. But the R in RAIN stands for recognize. And what we want to do is recognize what these habits are, which you've already started to do, hopefully, and recognize what's happening both around you in the moment those habits are happening, and also start looking at what's happening inside you during that time when these triggers are coming off. So let me give you an example. One of my coachees had a really bad habit that she confessed to of taking over in meetings and not listening to her colleagues. This was what we would say is her behavior. And she was brilliant at being able to see this. So she could say, I can see that I'm doing it. She's also had some feedback from colleagues saying, you're doing it. But she was really like, okay, I know I'm doing it and I really want to move past it. And what she went on to do was look at saying, okay, let's look at the triggers for that behavior. What's happening around me in that moment when I'm being triggered? And what she noticed was that in that moment, consistently, she could see that she was always with a group of people. She was always with junior people in a meeting room. And she was noticing that she had time that was being taken up that was beyond what she had available in her diary. So she was really feeling like, I don't have the time for this meeting. And she said that when she started to recognize what was going not just on around her, but what was going on inside her, she started saying that actually she could say she was experiencing this feeling of pressure, of fear, of anxiety, that deadlines were slipping. So there's that anxiety, and there was a lot of frustration in there. So she could start to say it's not just a trigger, but these are the external things that are happening and these are the internal things that are happening. When I was getting up to go and make my cup of tea, my trigger around me was my inbox filling up. But what was happening inside me in that moment was that I could say I was starting to feel a pressure of how do I get through all these emails, starting to fear that this feeling of being overwhelmed and the self-doubt. And those were the three things that I could start to label as being the inside factors that I was recognizing in that moment. So you can start to think about what's happening around you and inside you when your habit is being triggered. That's the second thing that I really want you to be having a look at. And when my coachee recalled her internal experience, the first thing that happened, and this really is such a beautiful thing, is that she just took this massive big deep breath, like this, like, you know, this sigh of relief of like, this is actually what's triggering me. And naming these experiences of your triggers, of the around things happening around you, things happening inside you, is unbelievably powerful. What it does, it effectively takes away some of the power that's sat there. That research shows us that this process of labeling or recognizing what's happening decreases the limbic activity in your brain, decreases the negative effect of all of those thoughts and those experiences, and it actually increases your executive function, so that ability to make decisions and move forward and make a more positive change. So I want you to be labeling this really, really well. So the next step of A, after we've done all that recognizing and labeling, is for allow. And it's so important at this stage, because we tend to say, okay, well, I'm feeling these feelings, but I don't want to deal with them. And we push them away. But for some of you, I think I've said before, I love the analogy of having a beach ball in a swimming pool. And there's a feeling that you don't really want. So you try and push it under the water and then you let go of it. But of course, what happens as soon as you let go of it, it pops straight back up again. So instead of trying to push away these feelings that are often really uncomfortable, what we want to do is allow them to be there. And what my coachee did in this moment was just to say, I can feel a pressure inside. Yes, I feel pressure. Yes, that's fear. Yes, I can see all those different things. And by saying the word yes, it was a way of acknowledging it was there and just letting it be. So we just want to let the beach balls, as many as there are, just float around the pool with us. It's absolutely fine. Don't resist them, just let them be. And we just can use a number of techniques. You can use that process of saying, yes, there's the fear. Yes, there's pressure. You can even say, hello, fear. Hello, pressure. Or you can make sure that you're saying, I see you. I see that fear. I recognize it. You want to acknowledge it. So whatever feels natural for you, whatever feels comfortable for you to say, but you want to allow those experiences to be there. And in allowing them to be there, they stop being as threatening. And you need them to become unthreatening because you want to be able to work with them. And whilst you're fighting them, we can't work with them. So I'm going to encourage you at this moment to get lots and lots of clarity right now and write down what you think one of your unconscious habits are that is not helping you. You may already have done this. Don't pick a big one that's full of trauma. Go easy on yourself. Make it a nice small habit, like making a cup of tea and avoiding your inbox. And then I want you to take a moment to recognize what's happening around you in that moment and what's happening inside you in that moment when your behavior is being triggered. And I want you to allow them to be there. Don't resist them. Try and push them away. Just let them be. We're saying these feelings and thoughts belong to this habit. This is the experience, and that's absolutely okay. So what you might end up writing down is something like, my habit is saying yes to things I don't have time for. What's happening around me in that moment is I'm seeing lots of anxious colleagues and senior staff. And inside me is a fear of letting people down. Yes, there's a fear there of letting people down. So I'm going to give you a couple of moments to do this. Like I said, you can always play this back and push pause to do it more deeply. And when you've got some reflections, I'm going to invite you to pop them into the chat box. It helps me to see if you're processing some of this. I can coach you through some things. So take a moment just to have a look at getting clear on what the habit is, really recognize what's going on around and inside, and allow those things to come up. Thank you, Catalin, for sharing. Yeah, there's that fear of being left behind. Absolutely, so normal. And that obviously feels like your inside experience. See if you can notice some of the around you experiences in those moments as well. Right, lovely. If any of you have identified any more of your habits that you really want to be tackling, if you've noticed any things that tend to be around you as triggers, or if you've noticed any of those internal things happening, feel free to keep typing them in. Then I'm going to move you on to taking you to look beyond the R and the A at the I and the N of this RAIN concept. So habit specialist, whose website I've just mentioned, Judson Brewer, says that one of the most important things you can do is really spend time with your triggers and be conscious and spend time with those things around you and those inside experiences, to be with your triggers instead of brushing them under the carpet. So what we actually have to do is not just label them and allow them to be there, as Catalin has done so beautifully by labeling this fear of being left behind, is that we have to take time to investigate them a little bit deeper. So the I is for investigate, and this is moving beyond the label and understanding what's happening more deeply. So let's start by looking at investigating some of the around factors. If we look at a situation entirely through the lens of curiosity, that's what we're really wanting to do, is like, what's happening in that moment? Why is it happening? How is it happening? Where, when, who? Everything becomes really, really interesting. You look at what are you focused on in the moment of that trigger? Where do you think these triggers have come from? Where did you learn to do this? So you want to go and get really curious with it. When I started getting curious about my habit of leaving things to the last minute, anybody got any similar habits of liking the last minute pressure? I realized by getting into my investigative mind that actually I quite liked those last minute deadlines because I had no other excuses to get distracted. It was like the end of the line and I could be really productive in a short space of time. And I loved that sense of being productive in a short space of time. It meant I could...
Kim, we've had a lovely comment in the Q&A from someone saying, my bad habit is procrastination, and I tend to continually distract myself from the goal and do many other things until my goal has become urgent.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Kindred spirits, and I'm sure there's loads of other people nodding somewhere else across Europe saying yes, we can feel it. And what I was noticing is actually I liked the fact that in the short deadline I could go very deep into my project. I could officially ignore everyone around me because my deadline was so tight. I could have focus. I didn't have to make a choice about what I wanted to do. It was made for me by my circumstances of no more time. So my no more time gave me the quality of work that I actually was really enjoying. Now, for you, it might be something quite different, but I want you to start exploring and investigating, what is it about that experience that I can learn from? And then what we have to do is look more closely and investigate those inside experiences. So, how those feelings of fear or inadequacy or pressure actually feel in your body. Now, this is a bit strange for any one of you who hasn't maybe practiced something like mindfulness. This might be the first time you've ever thought about just sit and stare at my feeling of pressure. But the reason why this is so important is because we want to actually spend time with these internal inside experiences, a bit like a deep sea diver swimming around a shipwreck. We want to notice how every element of that feels in your body. So when my coachee, who was trying to stop talking over people in meetings, did this for the pressure that she was feeling, she described the feel of it as a tall, solid brick that was inside her. And she was really doing a great job of looking around it. And she talked about the shape. I think she described it as being quite square, but long, a bit like what did she say? It was like a skyscraper. But that the color was a dark brown. She said the feeling of it was really solid, like a brick. So she became very, very aware of what that feeling was. Now, your exploration here might uncover some really incredible thinking. So it's worth taking a moment to investigate those inside triggers more deeply. What do the around factors look like? And what, of course, do these inside factors really look like? If you've got any observations on how on what the external factors are that actually you realize are encouraging your triggers and causing those habits, share them with us. We'd love to. We get so much out of us all getting this all out and sharing it and realizing we're all in such a similar place. If you actually are quite good at describing how your emotions feel, maybe it feels like a locked door, or it could be anything. Share it with us, because in using language, we can help each other find words to express their emotions as well. But you want to be able to become that familiar with it, and that is the investigation element of it.
Kim, we've had a comment in here saying, my bad habit is to smoke when I have to deal with stupidity around me. How can I tackle this?
Beautiful. So going for the smoke is the behavior. The trigger is the emotion of the stupidity. So what I would love you to do is really, in that moment, when just before you're about to go for that cigarette, start describing how does it feel in your body. Like, what are the emotions? I'm sure it might be something like embarrassment or regret. You'll have, Felix, you'll have the words for it. But that's exactly what I want you to do in this moment. Like, how does it feel inside you? Label those feelings and start to describe them by investigating them even further.
Kim, he's come back and said, I'm angry.
Beautiful. So then I want you to think about, where do you feel that anger? How does it feel inside you? Just get really familiar with it. Like, I want you to become its best friend. Like, just really carefully look at it and explore it. That's a perfect example. So when I started investigating my inside factors relating to be so last minute, what was really interesting for me was that although I loved the process of the work happening, I actually started identifying so much anxiety and pressure and stress. And when I spent time with those feelings, the thing that I noticed is that I actually felt a sense of loss. I had this realization that I was in fact losing myself when I put that pressure on. And suddenly we start to look at these things in a caring way. We start to notice that actually that's not how we want to be. And so you can start to see there, I've got the N for nurture on there, which is the last bit of rain, which is this slightly strange space. It's hard to tell you what to expect for this stage, but somewhere between the investigating, and you'll feel it if you're looking at that anger and you're describing it, what you'll notice if you spend enough time with it is that all of a sudden what will happen is something will shift inside you. And the purpose of the N is to allow a moment after you've investigated. It's almost like a light bulb pops up, or it's an intuitive feeling that you should follow. But you need to look after and care for these observations that you're having. Be kind to yourself in the way that a best friend would. And so what can start to pop up is, I don't want to feel that way anymore. Or my coachee, who is seeing this amazing brick inside of her, this pressure, she said she suddenly felt the need to hug it. Now, I know that sounds completely crazy, but in that moment, her compassion, the need to nurture it, was that she just wanted to hug it. And she said she was squeezing it and squeezing it, not in a bad way, but just to let it know that it's okay. It's absolutely okay that that feeling of pressure is there. And the really strange experience she had was that all of a sudden, the brick, she described it, just started to crumble. And she suddenly was left with this huge feeling of space inside her. And from there, she began to build her new habit.
Kim, can I just go a couple of comments? Is that now a good time?
Let's do that.
Felix has said, I tried that to investigate it, but I still go for a smoke.
Listening to the trigger instead of being with the emotion. So when you can describe it for me, and you've had that moment where you are really nurturing it and caring for it, and there's a moment of intuition that happens, I will know you've done it. So this isn't easy, guys. We avoid these feelings all the time. What we're saying is you cannot keep avoiding them. We have to explore them more deeply.
Another one is, another one is, I procrastinate until the deadline because I always have fear of failure. But at the end, everything goes well. How can I deal with this?
Yeah, well, you need to look at the fear of failure. That's the feeling that I want you to spend time with. Where does that come from? Explore where you pick that up from, but also explore how it feels. And it's this process of observing it that you start to notice it's not you. So Felix, if you spend enough time with that anger, you're going to notice it's just anger. It's just a feeling. Doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean you have to listen to it, be it. It's just a feeling. That fear of failure is just a fear of failure. But if you're not staring at it, you don't create the sense of objectivity. So I promise you guys, this might be sounding completely crazy to you, but that is the process I need you to go through. So just to give you another quick example as well, because we can take some more questions in the Q&A section, is that I want you to notice how this can happen so easily. So there was a moment when I started sitting down to start work, and I started opening up and reading the news. And what I noticed is I was avoiding starting work. And I was like, this is a habit I've got to break. So in that moment, I was noticing that around me, the factors were that I was spending time in front of a screen and reading. But inside, I was feeling depressed from reading all the bad news. And I was thinking about all the negativity in the world. And that's when my focus had gone. And I began to realize that I was literally conditioning my mind to start looking at the negativity every single morning. That was the opposite of the peace of mind I was looking for the reward of not dealing with my inbox from that habit. When I was going to get cups of tea, I'm realizing that actually I was still anxious and tense about my inbox, even though I was stood in the kitchen. And most of the time, I didn't even really want the cup of tea. You have to spend time in these moments and just be aware and conscious of what is going on. And when my nurture element kicked in, I decided, I want to start my day off differently. I want to start my day off with positive thoughts instead of these negative ones in the news. I want to make sure I'm not wasting time with tea, and I want to start getting on with my day. So you find this leverage into taking the better good habit only when you're properly in this bad space. So recognize what's happening around and inside you with the R. Allow these things to be, don't make them wrong. Acknowledge they are the experience you're having. Investigate the triggers, spend time with your self-doubt, spend time with your fears, your anger, and look closely at the behavior and the reward. Spend time being curious, work out where they come from, what they feel like. And then that N, in that deep observation of your investigation, you'll notice something shift in you that wants to nurture the situation. See what comes up, because this is what's going to help you design your new habit. So let's go on and have a look at how we start to design those new habits. If you're going to form a habit consciously, you need to declare a goal. So you need to declare a goal that you are going to face the embarrassing moments, or you are going to create a time where you do the work without a deadline, that you're going to create a focus. You're going to create that same set of excuses that mean you're not going to get distracted by things. And you want to make sure that goal is absolutely clear. So we know that, in fact, the influence of goal setting is what makes habits different from other automatic processes in the mind. You can create the swap between the old habit and the new habit, but you've got to declare, this is what my new habit is going to be. So what behavior would actually help you to get to your goal that you set out? And what would you focus on instead? So if you want to manage your diary better, what is the habit that is going to help you do that? If you want to get through your inbox faster, what is the habit, and manage that inbox, what is the habit that's going to help you do that? That brainwave for me was coming across the work of Graham Alcott, whose website Katie's also added in for you. He's known as the Productivity Ninja. But Productivity Ninja is slowly changing my life because I'm not scared of my inbox anymore. It's a way more helpful habit to follow his processes than to be worrying about that and ignoring it through cups of tea and the news, which aren't making me very happy. So what would you do instead? What would you do differently that's actually going to get you tackling the issue? Now, whether that's, I'm worried by things that are cropping up and opportunities I can't tackle, then what are you going to do? What lens are you going to use to look at that to do it differently? You know, I know what you mean. There's always opportunities coming along that I think, oh, it'd be amazing to do that, but it's not where my focus is right now. And then you have this anxiety, you missing out on something. But, that's rooted in this fear. It's a fear of missing out. But what if we translated that into being grateful I'm missing out? Because if I'm grateful that I'm missing out, I'm definitely working on the right priorities. Or maybe even gratitude that I'm missing out. And I, as a result, being excited about missing out, I take it and I give it to somebody else. And I'm using it then productively as another opportunity. So we've got to have a new relationship, develop these new goals. So we have to say, what is the behavior that's more helpful? And to really cement this, we can say, what pain is that going to help me avoid? Well, it's going to stop you getting caught up in worry. It's going to stop you smoking all those cigarettes, Felix. It's going to stop you having those late nights and the anxiety and going prematurely grey. We need to stop all of those bad habits. So, look at what it's going to help you avoid and look at what you're going to gain from it. You need to spell this out. I want you to come back into this webinar and literally write down, I will avoid, Felix, all the bad things that smoking brings. I am going to avoid being tired when I'm with my family because I didn't do that late night, and I'm going to get loads of great time with them. So come back and really spend time thinking about what you're going to get from it. And then lastly, we talk about how do we make these new habits really stick? Well, one of the things is that, we have to be realistic about getting new habits in. They develop subconsciously, but new conscious ones, we've really, really got to make sure they're going in nicely. So we want to repeat that RAIN method. Anytime it keeps cropping up, I want you to recognize it, allow it, investigate it, nurture it. Write down your goal and your behaviors and track your progress. I am so excited. Katie doesn't know about this yet. I think I might have mentioned it to you. This is my new diary. It's called Inspire Now. You can get it on Amazon. But it has daily and weekly target setting for all the new habits we're going to develop. It's so beautiful.
I love it.
But this is the thing that's keeping me accountable for all the things I said I was going to make now new habit. So you've got to find a way of keeping track of that. And remember, it can take a long time for a habit to develop. On average, it's about 66 days, which is what the research tells us. At worst, 254 days. So you need to have some staying power with this as well. And that's why I've put up these two Japanese mindset terms. They are just so beautiful. So Fudoshin, which means an immovable mind. I love this, the idea of like nothing is going to move your mind on this. No matter what's going on around you, you are going to achieve it. It's like the most hardcore that you could be in terms of willpower. So I want you to make sure you are bringing Fudoshin to any of these new habits that you want to introduce. And Zanshin is the idea of the remaining mind, that you see victory through to the end. So even if you've done 33 days, yes, good on me, of a new habit, that isn't good enough because you need to hit at least 66. And I've probably got to go the full hog to the 254 days. And you cannot give up until you've got to that point. So I want you to be able to say, I completed Zanshin because I didn't give up until I could actually say, I'm someone who's great at handling my stupidity. I'm someone who's great at handling my day-to-day work. I'm someone who's great at handling my work-life balance. That point, when you can label yourself in the good habit, you've managed to get there. And I want you to remember that one of the things that helps to make this stick is to keep doing this habit in the same place. So I am consistently writing this in the same place at the same time of day. I'm trying to do my habits in the same place at the same time of day, in the same way, be with the same people, because that's what actually helps to increase the likelihood that things are going to become automatic. And I wanted to mention to you as well, there's something called the boss worker voice, or you can call it the wisdom worker voice. Of in those moments when you're just not sure what you should be doing, call on the wisest person you know and ask them, what would that wise person tell me to do right now? Felix, that can be me, and I'm telling you it is not a good idea to go and have the smoke. I want you to think about what else would someone tell me to do in this moment? And you can use that as a lovely, quick, short circuit for that's how I get myself back into my good habit. And finally, I want you to use gratitude. Gratitude is something that I'm replaced. So when I was opening my computer up in the morning and for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I was reading the news and it was making me feel negative. Instead, I've replaced it with an exercise of literally on my fingers counting 10 things I'm grateful for about today. You guys were all in my gratitude exercise this morning, because researchers have shown that daily gratitude exercises just like that, counting on fingers, I'm grateful for this and this, creates higher levels of alertness. It creates enthusiasm, determination, optimism, energy, and people suffer from less depression, less stress, and they are more likely to help others and, crucially, guys, make greater progress towards their goals, their new habits. So I really want you to think about, just bring gratitude into your day that you are starting to make these new habits. So to wrap us up, because I'm leaving us very little time for questions, is I want you to know that your habits are your choice. You have to become conscious of them first. You have to understand them, get really familiar with why they're happening and what they feel like and the impact that they're having on you. But you have to then be able to see an alternate behavior that's more likely to give you what you actually want. And you need to have that determination of a ninja to write your daily tasks, the daily things you're committed to, and rewrite your destiny. So it is possible. It's just about a lot of small actions to choose good habits. Now, without any further ado, let's talk about some questions you might still have, and I'll see what I can cover. And if not, make Louisa do more webinars so we can keep asking them.
So there's definitely a theme, Kim, that people are much more efficient on the goal when under pressure. So that's quite a strong one.
It gives you all the excuses. Yeah, but you can create the excuses somewhere else without having all the negative impact.
Yeah, somebody said, I'm so perfectionist that I can't even start until the deadline is really near and I get everything done awfully.
Yeah, there you go. So you're not only having the negative impact of crunching it, the stress and pressure of doing it, but you're having the negative impact of it not coming out well. So you need to spend time with those feelings. Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm more efficient on a goal only when under pressure. I mean, not procrastinating, only more focused and productive. how can I deal with that?
Brilliant. So what you're getting is the focus and productivity. I can totally relate to that because that's what I was living off. I was like, oh my gosh, I get to be so focused because I'm working in the middle of the night and no one is messaging me. But then do it in the middle of the day and turn off all your devices and your inbox and give yourself that space then. But you also have to spend time with the negative impact of that behavior to want to stop doing it as well. You have to be like, oh God, I'm losing out so much by doing it this way that it is not worth it. And then you become the ninja that says, I'm going to do something differently. And just set yourself the goal. Just try it. Do it in the middle of the day. Shock horror. 2 weeks before the deadline.
So we've got one here is, they say what I do is to breathe deeply 10 times and then the feeling goes away. But I have these feelings every day anyway.
Yeah, but brilliant. It's not wrong that you have the feelings. It's wonderful that you are already using a technique to let them just subside. And then the next step is to then say, what am I going to replace it with? What am I going to shift my focus onto? A lot of the time we can get caught up in focusing on the negative stuff, the stuff that gets us down. So what's going to be more helpful? Focusing on the stuff you like about something. I go in and work with a lot of teams who are in quite challenging situations. They've got crises going on, whatever. And in those moments, they're so focused on the negativity of what isn't working that we have to just sit for like literally half an hour and list everything they love about the organization, love about the job, love about their colleagues. You have to find the new focus. So your habit is the negative thought is going to crop up. You do your breathing exercise and you're like, what do I want to be focused on? And you refocus and you force that thought in, you bring that thought in. And then slowly, if you manage that habit enough, it won't matter if that thought crops up because you just replace it really quickly with the new positive thought. So you're doing beautifully. Just add that next step in.
We've had one last comment here about how this all can manifest physically. So I feel pressure on my muscles and feeling disappointed with people that are not holding up to their promises.
Yeah, well, I love that you're noticing the pressure in the muscles because it's a very physical feeling. So I'd love you to take a moment and do that nurture element with it. Use that compassion. So take a moment just to really sit with that ache and that feeling of disappointment, and see what comes up if you just go in to nurture it. I think you'll have the most amazing experience. And the frustration that others aren't living up to their promises, it's a massive one. We can't often deal with others, but we can deal with how it comes up with us. You know, why is it frustrating you so much? Get curious, go in and investigate, and just sit with that feeling for long enough and see again what comes up. That these feelings in ourselves, the things we have to tackle as these habits, if we're going to get ourselves to a good place.
Shall I launch the poll, Kim? Are we
wonderful? So it's been so good to chat to all of you. This is now your 10 seconds to complete the shortest poll of your lives. Please click in. It's completely anonymous. No one can see what your vote is. It helps us just get really good feedback on these webinars. We want to be running more of them. We want to be getting better at doing them. So any feedback you can give is wonderful. And if you are keen to see any more particular subject areas, then just let us know as well. So I'm going to give you a couple more seconds, even though you've had...
Kim's just asked, can we see this webinar again? Yes, it's being recorded, isn't it, Kim? Yeah.
Recorded, and you'll have a link that gets sent out to you that allows you to replay, pause, dive into some of that deep thinking. Brilliant. So I've got 12 out of 20 people who have voted. I'm hoping a few more of you might just add in a few more. So I'll give you 5 more seconds to fill it in. Otherwise, thank you so much. A massive, massive thanks from me to everyone who's helped make this webinar happen. Thanks to the EIB. Thank you to Katie for helping me do this. And I very much look forward to catching up with you again. Send me details of how you found shifting your bad habits for your positive ones. Thanks, guys. Bye.